here we go. So, Abe, we put out an advertisement here, or a promotion, that we were going to talk about follow-up. And I know you did a course on our real estate sales solutions.com website on fanatical follow-up. But the other day you came up to me and you said, man, we got to talk a little bit more about follow-up. But you really didn't say follow-up. I really think you were saying you wanted to talk about more databases. And I think that was a result of the fanatical follow-up course that you did, and some of the feedback that you're getting. So can we just start today's conversation with that? Yeah. Because I don't want to miss what you really found as you identified as extremely important to talk about. So I don't want to miss that.
Yeah, for sure, Greg. And I'm glad you brought that up. So to me, they go hand in hand, right? Mm-hmm. You can't, in my opinion, you can't do follow-up if you don't have people to follow up with.
Okay.
Right. So in doing that course, which I know a lot of agents got back to me, and it really, multiple people, it really transformed the way they do business. Mm-hmm. So what I realized in doing that course was so many agents are mishandling their leads. Right. So what I mean by that is they get, they're getting leads, they're generating, some of them even circle prospecting, but then after that initial call, they just don't know what to do. Right. So
give me an example, like, so calling who?
Whatever. Let's just say I
want to slow it down and break it down for the Facebook members.
Okay, sure. Let's just say you're circle prospecting, right? Some agent decides, okay, you know what? I really want to get into business. I want to succeed at a higher level. So I'm going to make some outbound calls. I'm going to circle prospect. So they'll call and they'll have an initial conversation with somebody. And then what I realize is, not number one, the intention of the call typically is just to see if they're looking to sell or not. And if they're not, that's it. They get off the phone, make the next call. Mm-hmm. So that could be a whole nother conversation within itself. What you should do in a circle prospecting call to really maximize your return of time, right? That could be a whole different conversation as well, which I think we should have as well. So what number one, it starts with they're not getting email addresses for people in many cases. And when they do, they typically don't have a system in place or a process in place to be able to follow up effectively with those people. So it could be, if they're on paper, if they're using Vulcan, that sometimes they're putting the data into Vulcan. If they're using Mojo, they'll put the information like the email address into Mojo, maybe set a reminder to call, maybe not. And the stuff just sits there. So they kind of go hand in hand. So I wanted to have this conversation. Obviously, we can't go through the entire course. It was a pretty in-depth course, but at least let's touch on, what's the importance of follow-up? Like, why should we follow up? Okay, who do we follow up with? The importance of building a database. If you want life to get easier for you as the months and the years go by that you're in the business, as opposed to constantly having to make outbound calls to generate now business. So that kind of conversation.
Okay, so let's start with. So I mean, it's interesting. Like one of the first questions that you just threw out is, why should you follow up? Okay, so what are your thoughts on that? Now, for those of you that are listening, that may seem like a really, really, really basic, kind of like almost too basic of a question. Like, why should you follow up? Like, we all know that follow-up is important, but I'm interested to hear what he says, and then I've got some thoughts on it also.
Yeah, so from the context of what I'm thinking, why you should follow up is, the overwhelming majority, 99%, 98% of people that you talk to for the first time are not going to immediately act.
Okay.
Right? They're not going to automatically say, yeah, you know what? I am looking to sell. Why don't you come over and list it for me? Right? You're going to get those. You're going to stumble over those once in a while, again, within the context of circle prospecting. Right? So You're going to get that once in a while. But the other 98% of the people are not going to be ready. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's going to require multiple conversations with somebody to be able to get the business, whether it's a buyer or it's a seller. It's going to require multiple conversations in order to get them through the funnel, to get them to the bottom of the funnel, and then either buy or list and sell at that point. So that's why people should follow up. So it's important to set up your process from the beginning and say, okay, this is my intention. When I make a call, I go through a 4-step process. Okay, when I'm making that initial contact with somebody. Okay, the first step is are you looking to buy or sell? Okay, if they're not, then I'm asking, okay, well, do you know any neighbors that might be thinking? Again, let's keep it in listing. Okay, are you looking to sell? No. Do you know any neighbors that might be looking to sell so we can match up with these buyers? That's step number 2. Okay, step number 3, if that's a no, step number 3 is who do you know that might be buying or selling right now in this market? Step number 3. Okay, and then step number 4, if all of those are no's, and I'm convinced that they're no's, that then I just smoke screens, then I'll proceed and get the email. Right? So that 4-step process in which I go through on every single call allows me to, number 1, get the ones that are immediate yeses, right? Number 2, possibly get a referral for a client, for a neighbor. Number 3, possibly get another referral for a buyer or seller. And then number 4, take them and put them into a system, a process that's already predetermined and preset, that I'm able to effectively communicate with them based on what their timeline is, not based on what I want the timeline to be. Mm-hmm. Right. So that 4-step process, and then you put them into wherever they belong. And when you have your system set up, and I think that's something we should dive into, is how do you set it up? When do you follow back up again? So that's where you plug them in.
Yeah. So I want to go back to the initial question, why you should follow up. I just kind of give some additional thoughts because we're definitely in agreement on what you said there. I may just articulate it maybe a slightly different way. And that is with the adoption, the high adoption of the internet being the kind of the go-to resource for buyers or sellers to do their initial research, whether it is research on their property values, research on the market, research on what's available for sale. They just want to look at pictures of homes and whatnot. The internet is pretty much the place that people go. And if we kind of go back in time, years and years ago, I'll date myself, let's say 20 plus years ago, when there wasn't real estate websites, there was no such thing as IDX and IDX feeds to the internet. What was happening is the most important lead we would get, or the way that we got leads back then was 2 ways. Number 1, it was a sign call, or it was a call off of like the real estate book, Homes and Land. Some markets you have Harmon Homes. We never had that in the Myrtle Beach area, but I do know about that magazine. It's like a Homes and Land, a real estate book magazine. We either got it from print ads or we got it from a sign. Now, what happened when we were getting calls from a sign, usually the sign call meant that people already were looking in my city and narrowed it down to an area, and then narrowed an area down to a community, and then narrowed a community down to the curb appeal of the external feel and look of a property. So we know that they already liked the curb appeal of the house. They liked the street that it was on. They liked the area that it was in, and they liked the city that it was in. So because they called on that sign, we knew all that. And because they knew all that, then that showed us, or that told us, that these people are a little bit closer to a buyer phase than they are an exploratory phase. Like they did their exploring on their own and drove around the city and found the area, and then started looking at different neighborhoods and found the home. See, they actually just kind of like qualified themselves. They qualified area, city area, community, and the look of the homes just through that process. So when we got a call, they are actually ready to go look at the property right that moment, because they were calling and say, hey, I'd like to come look at this property, or see how many bedrooms it was. So the call to an appointment ratio was much higher. The lead to appointment ratio was really high back then. Well, then the internet came along and we started giving all this information. They didn't need to call us anymore to see how many bedrooms it was, because it's on the internet. They could see the interior pictures and whatnot. But then what happened is then people started watching what I call, well, not what I call, they call HGTV. HGTV made real estate entertaining. They made it like, gave people the idea of you could buy this ugly house and turn it into this pretty house and actually build wealth by doing it. They empowered people with the belief that, hey, and confidence that I can do this. I need to start looking at real estate. Well, then after HGTV came this one little website called Zillow, which then actually had properties all over the world, or at least all over the United States on that property. So people could just look on Zillow and be entertained. So the masses started now looking at real estate, not just the buyers, everybody, not the buyers that were buying. It was the non-buyers that are looking for entertainment we started looking at websites. Then we started capturing those leads because they needed to ask a question. So we captured a lead. And when we captured that lead, some of those were people that were just entertaining themselves. They were in the dreaming phase. Some of those were in the exploratory phase. And a few of those were in the buying phase. And before, they were all in the buying phase. They weren't exploring. We never talked to them when they were dreaming and exploring. Now we're talking to people when they're dreaming and they're exploring. And so the majority of leads that you get online, whether or outbound calling, the majority of them are going to be, except expireds and FSBOs, are going to be more of in the dreaming phase or the exploratory phase. And that's why you have to follow up, because follow-up is a form of lead generation nowadays. See, we're capturing these leads in the dreaming phase, and all we're doing is creating a list of potentials. Capturing all these leads in the workflow, in the exploratory phase, now we've got a database. Now you have to continue to work and nurture and call and love on that database in order to then be there and be in relationship when they transition from dreaming phase to exploratory phase to buying phase. That's why you have to follow up. I think even the term follow up is kind of sometimes we're defining it wrong. I think most people look at follow up as I got these hot leads that I got to follow up with and make sure I schedule appointments with them tomorrow. And then I schedule another appointment the next day. It's almost like follow-up is only really done with your AAA leads. And it's because we're defining follow-up as we only have to follow up with the people that are ultra, ultra hot. When the reality is we need to be building databases and following up with those databases and as a form of nurture to make sure that they remember us when they now move into the buying phase. That's what I wanted to add to that.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a great addition. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, follow-up is not just your AAA leads. I mean, it needs to be a whole database. And there's different ways of following up as well.
Yes.
Right? Not everyone necessarily means it has to be a phone call, okay, at a specific time. You know, between technology, there's great sources out there, services out there right now, HomeBot, every CRM out there, whether it's Real Geeks or anything else, has built-in workflows where you can send out text messages, emails. So there's a bunch of different things that you can do to stay in communication with people and follow up with them. It doesn't always have to require a phone call to every single person in your database as your database gets bigger.
Yeah. I know one thing that a question that I get, and just, I don't know if you answered this, in your course, but one thing that people ask, well, Greg, if you're going to follow up with that much, what do you say?
Yeah.
Like, what do you say to them? So what are your thoughts? What are some tips on how you can, continue to follow up, but not sound like, you're saying the same thing every time, or maybe it's okay to say the same thing every time. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a great question. And yes, that does come up often. I'm a big believer in keeping good notes. Okay, so every single conversation I have with somebody, I'm making notes as we're speaking. And I'm making notes on just about everything they tell me. If they're mentioning, we're moving to Florida to be close to the grandkids. Okay, I want to know what part of Florida. Okay, I want to know how many grandkids do they have. I want to know the ages of the grandkids. Okay, and all this stuff I'm putting into the system. So now, to me, what you say should always be a continuation of where the conversation left off last time. Okay, so wherever that conversation left off, it should be, hey, when we spoke last, Greg, you mentioned you were moving to Florida because you wanted to be closer to John and Jim, your 10 and 12-year-old grandkids. Just wanted to check back in with you and see if that's still the plan by the end of this year. Is that something that you're still thinking of doing? So, I mean, that's kind of like, I'm calling with a purpose. I'm not just calling and say, hey, Greg, you ready to sell yet? Hey, Greg, you ready to sell yet? So get away from that commission breath. It's more of an engaged conversation relevant to what's happening in their lives. So I think it starts with good notes, and then just it's a continuation of where the conversation left off last time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. And so, let's just say that you were calling somebody, let's say, so what, let's just say I got a database. Okay. I've got a database of sellers. I'm going to give a specific lead. So I generate seller leads off of, say, the home, what's my home worth kind of widget. And I generate some seller leads, and I call them and they say, you know what, I'm really not interested. I'm just kind of curious to see how the market is. I mean, we might do something in the next year or so, maybe 2 years from now, not doing anything now. We put them into the database. How often, what's the duration or the frequency of follow-up that you would recommend for that particular scenario?
So I mean, well, I think let's go back, because one of the things I want to make sure we address here is how to structure your follow-up system, right?
Okay.
How to segment that database.
Okay.
Right, because I think it's important, because you have to be able to segment it, because as you're talking to more and more people, it can get very confusing on, number one, who's your AAA lead? Number two, who's someone that might be thinking of selling down the road 2 years, 3 years from now, but you don't obviously want to forget about them. You want to be able to still communicate with them. So I think, segmenting the database and splitting it up into smaller, manageable chunks, I think is important. And there's multiple ways of doing it. In that fanatical follow-up course, I recommend a couple of things. I recommend having an A folder, depending on whether you're using, what software you're using. I use Pipedrive, so I dive in pretty extensively on how I structure my segmentation, how I divide my database up. So I've got what I call, it's a pipeline of my top 50 people. Okay. And I don't want this list to get more than 50. So these are 50 people that, based on conversations with them, are very likely to list in the next 30 days. Now, those are the people I'm calling on a regular basis. Some of them I'm calling daily, some of them I'm calling weekly. None of them are going more than, I'd say, 10 to 14 days where I don't communicate with them. Right. So that's a list of a group of people that's going to be right there front and center in front of me every single morning. Then I've got a second list, which is going to be the B leads, and it's people that are going to be likely to sell within the next 12 months. Okay, and I've got a separate folder or a separate segmentation for those, and that list could be 200-300 people. And then I've got my C folder, which is going to be, look, you told me you weren't going to sell, you're really not interested, but I kind of got a feeling that at some point down the road you're going to sell. I at least want to stay in communication with you every quarter. Then I've got you in a separate folder that I'm calling you or putting you through automation every single quarter. And then I've got the rest of my database, which is just going to be mostly automation. It'll be HomeBot messages. It'll be Real Geek workflows, Contact Junkie workflows, things like that. And I'm waiting for them because that's going to be the biggest group. That group is probably 5,000 people in my database. And I'm waiting for people to raise their hands or show some sort of or do some sort of activity that allows me to think that there's a possibility that they're ready to sell. So I mean, I think segmenting it is really important. And again, A, B, C, and D is something you and I have always talked about in the past. I think is the way that you do it. Yeah.
So, so going back to say I generate a seller lead, and I guess in that scenario, I would say there might be a B lead or maybe even a C lead because they don't really have any time frame that they're thinking about doing anything. Okay. What I recommend is they be called at a minimum every 60 days, but it would really be great if you called them every 30 days. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're generating a lot of leads through this way, then through generating a lot of seller leads, then you're probably going to get to a point where maybe you have 1,000 of them. I mean, I have thousands of them, so I can't actually reach out to them by personal phone call every 30 days. I wouldn't be able to make that many contacts and still do all the things that I'm responsible to do. But for most of you, you're not generating at that volume. So what I would be recommending is you call them monthly. And then I would also recommend that once the list got too big, you would call them, say, every 60 days. And then that would be the minimum, is every 60 days. But the key is you would, in between the calls, you would have other things set up, other automation, like say, put them on a HomeBot to get a HomeBot digest, which is going to then email them through automation. It's going to automatically email them some great reports. I could put them in my Real Geeks as a seller lead, getting a market activity report, which would be like sending them a CMA every single month. I could put them in my CRM and send a video update of the market that I might send to everybody, not just do a one-off video for that one. That'd be too time consuming, but I'll do a one video and email that or text that to the entire database of these seller leads that I'm referring to. Okay. So now I would be capturing that seller lead. They'd be opting into something that I put out there. And then I would be calling them immediately. I would identify that they're not that interested. If they're interested, I move forward. If they're not that interested, I put them in my database. And then I put them scheduled to call every, say, 60 days, and then a HomePot report every 30 days, a market activity report every 30 days, a sold report every 30 days, and a video to that entire group every 30 days. Now think about it. That's 48. That's 48 plus 6. That's 54 touches in a year. Now, I only did 6 of those manually because those were the calls every 60 days. And the other 48 were done through automation once I set it up in my CRM and set it up in my systems correctly. Now I've got 54 touches. I've combined reports through email, automated reports. I've combined video updates and personal phone calls. So I've used email, I've used text, I've used automation, and I've used the phone calls. So I've used multiple channels to actually reach out to them. I've done it in proper frequency, and I'm very consistent about it. And I had the personal touch of the call. One thing that I guarantee that's going to happen is you are going to be a household name for that property owner. And if you do this over and over and over again, you may be the household name for thousands of property owners. And I just wonder, and I want you to ponder this question, and that is, if you were top of mind for thousands of property owners, documented property owners, and they thought of you based on all those things that I just shared that you would be sending them, what do you think that could do for your business? Because there's going to be a tremendous amount of them who will call you and say, now I'm ready. Let's list this thing. And they're not going to be comparing you to other agents. They're just going to want you to be their agent. And then there are going to be those that refer you and forward your videos to their friends. Hey, did you see this? I don't know if you get in these videos. This guy's said something pretty cool. I heard you're thinking about selling. You may want to watch this video. That's what they're going to do. They're going to start forwarding your emails, forwarding your reports, forwarding your videos. And all of a sudden, that 1,000 people that you're working in that database based on this system, you might actually be touching 2,000 people because they're forwarding it to other people.
Yeah,
so that's really the value.
That's spot on, Greg, and that's how you build a business.
That's building a business.
That's building a business, because now you're really maximizing every single lead that you ever talk to.
Yeah.
Okay, you're generating future business by these come list me calls. The people that are going to be calling you because they've been getting your stuff. I mean, you and I get a ton of those calls.
Yeah.
I've been getting your stuff for years. Okay, I'm ready to sell.
Yeah.
Okay, but on top of that, you're also going to get, by making that many attempts, by that many touches throughout the year, you're also going to catch them at the right time.
Yeah.
Right. As opposed to other agents that just kind of, they're throwing a cast, once in a while, once every 6 months, once a year. You're throwing that cast out there 54 times with your system.
The chances of getting a bite are extremely high. Much higher,
much higher. So you're going to get a lot more now bites on those calls, and then you're going to get future business with them calling you in whenever they're ready.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hey, I know we're right at that, we're right at the 30-minute period. So we want to keep these things to 30 minutes, somewhere in that range. I know it's approaching 10 o'clock. For those of you that are listening, I really recommend you listen to the last portion of it. I recommend you listen to all of it, but go back and listen to the structure that I just shared with you on how to generating those seller leads, and then all the different touches that you do. That's 54 touches. You're going to be top of mind. I highly recommend that you make use of the information that you're hearing and put something in place. Execute on one thing. If that's one thing you did, if you just executed on even sending them one of those reports on a consistent basis, that'll have it. You'll see an advantage and a benefit to your business. Abe, we're going to continue to do these things on Wednesdays. So this is, but Wednesday typically at what time?
Yeah, they're not going to be this early. The only reason we switched to this early because I'm leaving town today. They're going to be every Wednesday at 11:30.
Okay, so Wednesdays at 11:30. Everybody keep that in your calendar. Abe's traveling today, so he's going to be on a plane. So we wanted to do it earlier because we did want to get it started this week. But this is going to be a weekly thing, and please comment below. Also check out Level Up Podcasts. I've been really putting some good podcasts out lately. The guests have been just fantastic, dumping some great information out on the Level Up Podcast. Other than that, Abe?
Yeah, two things. Let me add two things real quick. So we do, these are only going to be 30 minutes, but we do want them to be engaging, right? We don't want to just be talking all the time. So if you do have questions, please feel free to chime in anytime with these. And also, if you have any ideas of what topics you would like that would be most beneficial to you and your business, message us on Facebook, and we'll include some of those topics in these conversations.
Yes, that's awesome. Well, you have safe travels.
Thanks, Greg.
And check us out on Real Estate Sales Solutions also, everybody. Talk to you later.
All right, see you.
Bye-bye. Bye.